Get started. 3, 2, 1. Hey, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. I'm sitting down with Nico Mayer. Nico is an author. Additionally, he spent many years coaching high-end youth athletes through his specialized training in cognitive development. And I had to get him on the show because he's written a new book. And you know how I am. I'm a curious kitten. And he mentioned decentralized thinking, and his book that's coming out is called The Decentralized Mind. And I wanted to welcome him on the show and give you some of his insights because I think you're really going to enjoy them. I know I am. So Nico, welcome to the show, buddy. And let's start with, dude, how crazy is it that we're talking right now, having not met each other, and then all of a sudden we're just talking about Australian-Canadian relationships and going to be talking about your wicked book coming out? Like, isn't this a wild time to be alive?
Life is beautiful. And Dave, thank you very much for having me on. This is a pleasure. I find it fascinating that we met less than a week ago and we've had maybe 20 minutes of conversation, and I feel like I know you. Like there's that connection there, and that's popping up more and more and more, which I imagine and also observe is a sign of the changing times that is occurring, where like-minded people are starting to find themselves more, which is beautiful. But the antithesis of that and the spectrum that it lies on, it means that there's also going to be more tension present because of the level of connection that's out there. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
Absolutely, as am I. So let's start with a little bit of background, man. Obviously, you're Australian. Love me, the Aussies. Shout out to Andy Plimer. I have to give a shout out to my buddy who I was talking about. Every time he comes up, there's any kind of reference, because he's literally like the reason why I'm in podcasting right now, because he started his Rugby Coaches Corner podcast way before I did, and I humiliated him for starting a podcast because I thought he was a super nerd, but thanks to Andy. So shout out to Andy. But obviously you're Australian, and you've done a lot of cool things. What got you to where you are now?
So I'm Australian and I don't surf yet. So I just want to put that claimer out there.
It's like a Canadian that doesn't play hockey.
Exactly. I'm a decentralized Australian, if you will.
Cool.
So very blessed when I was younger to play a lot of sport. It's been a very big part of my life. However, the funny thing there is that I grew up borderline obese, and I was lucky inside of that the physical side of things wasn't a limiting factor for me due to my ability to develop skills at a very fast rate and to be very efficient. So even when it came to things like soccer, yes, I wasn't the fittest, most well-conditioned kid running around the field you think would be one of the key attributes of success. However, I could read the game and position myself really well and became a really good passer and distributor of the ball. That transitioned into swimming, it transitioned into basketball, it transitioned into hockey, it transitioned into netball. Like, that's the typical Australian of we play every sport under the sun. And the skills that allowed me to develop from a acquisition standpoint and also a feedback mechanism standpoint of you're going to make mistakes and that's how you're going to learn was fantastic. And I was blessed to represent my state in baseball. Surprisingly enough, I was a catcher.
Really?
And in 2005, I had the opportunity to travel to America for a training camp with Major League Baseball team. Back then, they were the Florida Marlins. And I always had the dream of being a professional athlete. And I was like, oh my God, how good is this? And I get there and it's that cognitive dissonance, just whole world collapses if you go, oh, I suck at this. I'm really bad. Oh my God, look at all of these other guys and look at how committed they are and how hard they work and how athletic they are. And it was the first time that I got in my own head and the story shifted, the perspective shifted. I wasn't the big fish in the little pond anymore. I was now out in the real world and I failed hard. I went into the biggest slump. Like, honestly, the story is, and I know it's inaccurate, but it felt like I didn't get a hit for a year. I came back to Australia And where I'd made the New South Wales country team the years before, I didn't make it this next time. And I was distraught. And I remember sitting there on a Monday morning and mum on one side, dad on the other, and just crying my eyes out. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I really wanted this, but I'm not good enough. And I quit. I honestly quit. I used excuses of I'm going into like senior school and I want to get a job. I'm getting to that age. I don't have time for it anymore. And I walked away from it. And thanks to the cognitive development tools that we'll go through today, I was able to reframe that, rewire it, and now reinforce a new story where I look at it and I go, okay, no, I saw the truth and I was able to make a choice where I then stepped more towards what it was that I wanted, but I didn't know what that would look like at that point in time. So I went into a rabbit hole and a very negative cycle on the back end of that, of battling depression, anorexia, orthorexia, and suicidal thoughts. It completely broke my world. And I was very lucky to have the support system that I did. It got me into a love of health and fitness and this human development, where I go to uni because I think, hey, I want to study nutrition. Like, I love nutrition. So I spent years studying that, became a dietitian, did a little bit of sports nutrition. Like, this isn't the thing. And inside that time, I took a trip to Europe. And it was when I was over there that I had the space created. And I was like, okay, what is it that I really want to do? I started to read a lot of the greats and the classics and get even more into this cognitive development side of things. And I said, hey, I want to start a youth academy. Like, when I get back home, I want to start that and support youth athletes who are in a position that I was to better prep them for the reality of what is to come. So I come back home, I start that. And again, my whole world just shatters. My very first client is an Australian schoolboy, so rugby league, one of the top tiers. He went on to then transition to gridiron, won 40 collegiate scholarships to go over and play gridiron in the States. My second ever client was an Australian gymnast who won gold for Australia. I had kids come on who were making state teams and that already, some who were in local teams, and hey, I want to go on to compete at a higher level. And I'm grateful that now the business has been closed for 2 years and the kids that we had in it are still on the trajectory where they're making, like the Newcastle Jets side, who's the national soccer team for the area, and are playing on the national stage, like on TV when it comes to netball, and are transitioning into college and university. And they're on track to receive the degrees that they want. Well, I can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry, I screwed that one up. No, I was just asking, what netball is that? Is that what we call handball here, or is that like a basketball type game?
So netball is similar to basketball. However, you can't bounce or run with the ball. It's kind of like you're stuck in the mud as soon as you catch it.
Okay.
And there's 3 different sections, and depending on what position you play, you can only go into either 1, 2, or all 3 of them. It's kind of weird, but very aggressive for a feminine sport. A lot of contact.
Very cool. Very cool.
Played on concrete. So
okay, so let's just recap here. So you actually were on the Florida Marlins like A squad?
So came over for a youth development camp. We flew in, myself and 20 other Australian boys, into Fort Lauderdale, and we were over there for a period of about 6 weeks, where 5 days a week we'd be at the training facility going through. There'd be some Dominican boys and some Cuban boys there as well. And we were all just intermingling, playing scrimmage games, doing training. And there were 2 boys from the Australian group that went over that got picked up, but they were by Boston. And then everyone else, unfortunately, from Australia came back home. And the Dominican boys and the Cuban boys, man, they are phenomenal. I just sat there in awe. They are absolutely incredible.
I did a service trip when I was still teaching, to Dominican Republic with a large group of 15-year-olds from the high school, and the town that we were in, was it South? No, that's another. I can't remember the town. Anyways, the town was like its claim to fame was it like pumps out MLB players like crazy, and there's baseball diamonds everywhere, and they're playing barefoot all day without a regulation bat, without a regulation ball, and it's no wonder. Like, they are just ripping up the baseball diamond, and they're playing all day. How do you compete? like, I don't even think they're going to school. I think they just skip school to play baseball all day. They have statues of MLB players because they're heroes, right? They're the guys that made it. And it's just, it was incredible to see like the level of commitment. Like, we have a pretty high commitment here for hockey, like, you know, but it's not like you can only play it outside in the winter for a very short period of time. You know, there they play it all year round, 24/7. So you got there and you realized, wow, I need to elevate or I'm never going to make it here. And so you went home and you just kind of went inward and just kind of fell apart. It sounds like, but that was the impetus to make you start realizing, hey, like, I wonder why that happened. And it created curiosity. And so my question, like you said, you started reading the classics. What were the classics? I'm curious.
I read War and Peace. I read a lot of Dostoevsky. I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, I read a lot of Bukowski. And the book that made the most impact on me was Alexandre Dumas, The Three Musketeers.
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
At that point in my life, that was the book. It's the book that started to tell me these stories that showed a different potential of what was possible by a small group of people. And it opened my eyes and created a love, or sorry, I should say reignited my love for reading. So the reason that I've transitioned into writing, it's what I did when I was younger. Like, when I was little, my imagination runs wild, and I would just sit there and write short story after short story after short story, or I'd be speaking with, you know, people in my family, and I'd start talking about things, and like, you're going to be a commentator one day. Like, you just don't shut up, and you love sport, and your imagination runs wild. And like, as we'll get into with the conversation about the book, that was ripped out of me because of the memes of the time and what the viewpoint was of society, and the people who I put into positions of authority in my own life would tell me, you suck at this, you're never going to make a career out of it. Like, I had English teachers tell me, you're shit at writing, like, don't do it. And as a kid, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to let that go. So there was a period of, it would have been about 6 years, where I did not write and I did not read. It was like, okay, this is not me. I'm not going to commit time to it. And then The Three Musketeers is what reignited the spark. And then I just devoured books, like devoured them. Transitioned more into a like fictional side of things, and then into self-development, and then into cognitive development, human development. And yeah, here we are.
Fascinating. You mentioned that your teacher's like, yeah, you suck at writing. And now look at you, right? Like, I had something similar when I was in elementary school, and you said you were, you know, borderline obese, like chubby kid. Me too. Like, you know, all through elementary school, like, I was always big and just chubby, you know, and it always affected myself, you know, my self-confidence and the way I looked at myself. And I had a gym teacher that said, and this was in the 80s, so you could say this, right? Like, Dave's too chubby, and likely